Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, Text 3. This is the Bhagavatam translated with commentaries by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Om Agnati Mirandasya Kinagna Salakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance. My spiritual master has opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my most humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. So, this canto, Canto 6, we're beginning that now. And this first chapter, Chapter 1, is entitled The History of the Life of Ajamil. So Maharaj Parikshit is hearing from Sukadeva Goswami. And in the fifth canto, toward the end of the fifth canto, there were the descriptions of the hellish worlds. And that disturbed Maharaj Parikshit, because the nature of a devotee is that they don't like to see anyone suffer. And the hellish planets are definitely places of suffering. That's what they're there for. The suffering is there as a punishment to try to rectify the behavior of those that transgress even the laws of material nature. So he's inquiring about how people can be, how someone can be taken out of this. How can they be rescued from this ongoing cycle, repeated birth and death, sometimes enjoying on the heavenly planets and sometimes suffering in the hellish planets, and just going around and around and around in the cycle of birth and death. So this is chapter 1, Life of Ajamil. This is text 3. And this is Parikshit Maharaj speaking to his spiritual master, Sukadeva. He says, you have also described at the end of the fifth canto the varieties of hellish life that result from impious activities. And you described in the fourth canto the first Manvantar, which was presided over by Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. No commentary there. So we go on to the next verse. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and King Uttanapada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets and stars, with varied seas, lands, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens, and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth and the luminaries in the sky and the lower planetary systems. You very clearly describe these planets and the living entities who live on them. Prabhupada's commentary. Here the words Yatedam Ashrajad Vibhu clearly indicate that the Supreme, the Great, Almighty Personality of Godhead created this entire material world with its different varieties of planets, stars, and so forth. Atheists try to conceal the hand of God which is present in every creation, but they cannot explain how all these creations could come into existence without a competent intelligence and almighty power behind them. Simply to imagine or speculate is a waste of time. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Matak sarvam bhavatade. Whatever exists in the creation emanates from me. Iti matva bhajanti mam bhutabhava samanvita. When one fully understands that I create everything by my omnipotence, one becomes firmly situated in devotional service and fully surrenders at my lotus feet. Unfortunately, the unintelligent cannot immediately understand Krishna's supremacy. Nonetheless, if they associate with devotees, read authorized books, they can gradually come to the proper understanding, although this may take many, many births. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam jamanamante gyanavanmam prapadyate Vyāsadeva sarvamiti samahatma sadurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Vyāsadeva, Krishna, is the creator of everything, and his energy is displayed in various ways. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, a combination of the material energy, Bhumir Apo Nalo Vayu, and the spiritual energy, the living entity, exists in every creation. Therefore, the same principle, the combination of the Supreme Spirit and the material elements, is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. And Prabhupada's taking the opportunity here to take a swing at the cover-up that Krishna is actually behind the material creation. There has to be intelligence and a creator. But instead, how people prefer to simply try to speculate or guess and just completely ignoring the Supreme Being, the conscious Supreme Being. So he's explaining how it is possible someone they associate with devotees and they hear from them. They hear from the devotees and they hear from the authorized books. And what are the authorized books? They're books, the devotees, recordings of the devotees speaking, or Krishna speaking directly, like Bhagavad Gita. Although that is also presented by a devotee, by the devotees. So there's really no way of getting around the arrangement of Krishna to surrender to his devotees, his representatives. Is the way to get to Krishna. So, he lives in the heart of his devotees. But he says that can take quite a long time. It can take many, many births to gradually come to the proper understanding. But that is the method, that's the path, is to hear from the devotees. Associate with devotees, render service, read authorized books. Text 6. O greatly fortunate and opulent Sukadeva Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains. So he has just heard about the hellish planets and the punishments that are there for the transgressions or the impious acts, the acts that go against the arrangements of the Lord. Prabhupada's commentary. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Sukadeva Goswami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter hellish planets and suffer. Now Maharaj Parikshit, being a devotee, is concerned with how this can be stopped. A Vaishnava is paradukha dukhi. In other words, he has no personal troubles, but he's very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlad Maharaj said, "My Lord, I have no personal problems, for I've learned how to glorify your transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do not have a problem, however, for I'm simply thinking of these rascals. I do have a problem, however, for I'm simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with Maya Sakaya, temporary happiness, without knowledge of devotional service to you." This is the problem faced by a Vaishnava. Because a Vaishnava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he personally has no problems. But because he's compassionate toward the fallen conditioned souls, he's always thinking of plans how to save them from the hellish life in this body and the next. Parikshit Maharaj therefore anxiously wanted to know from Sukadeva Goswami how humanity can be saved from gliding down to hell. Sukadeva Goswami had already explained how people enter hellish life, and he could also explain how they could be saved from it. Intelligent men must take advantage of these instructions. However, unfortunately, the entire world is lacking Krishna consciousness. Therefore, people are suffering from the grossest ignorance, do not even believe in a life after this one. To convince them of their next life is very difficult because they've become almost mad in their pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save them. Maharaj Parikshit is the representative of one who can save them. Now that's interesting, that Maharaj Parikshit is the representative of one who can save them. Now, how is that? He's asking the questions. Sukadeva Goswami has the answers, but Maharaj Parikshit is asking the questions. And he's opening up a storehouse. So he is the one who can save, because he's asking the question for everyone, how can we be saved? It's so delicate, the dynamics of, and sweet, the dynamics of the devotional interactions are with the devotees and the Lord. Arjuna the same way, because he was asking the questions. He opened the door for everyone. And then Krishna would speak Bhagavad Gita. So Maharaj Parikshit is in that position. So, can you please explain how it can be saved from this cycle of birth and death and having to go through these hellish planets? Bhagavatam ki jai. Text 7. Sukadeva Goswami replied, now Sukadeva is a representative of Krishna. He's heard the Bhagavatam from his father, and he is now passing on this message of Godhead to his disciple, Parikshit Maharaj. And we get to hear their conversation. So Sukadeva Goswami replied, my dear king, if before one's next death, whatever impious acts one has performed in this life with his mind, words, and body are not counteracted through proper atonement, according to the description of Manu Samhita and other Dharma Shastras, one will certainly enter the hellish planets after death and undergo terrible sufferings, as I've previously described to you. So the laws of material nature are stringent. There's no bending them. That's it. You put your hand in the fire, it burns it. There you go. So whatever impious acts one's performed in this life, words, body, and even with the mind, if they're not counteracted by proper atonement, as described in the scriptures, certainly goes to the hellish worlds and has to undergo suffering. That's it. Boss finished. There's no, it's just the way it works. Material nature, it runs like a machine. It's like the computer. You either work with the computer in the way that it's designed, or you got a big mess on your hands. There's no compromise with the computer. It's the computer's way or not at all. So similarly, material nature, it's programmed. 3 modes of material nature, pious activities, impious activities, it's programmed. And either you go along with the program or you got a problem. So as Prabhupada's commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that although Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee, Sukadeva Goswami did not immediately speak to him about the strength of devotional service, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Mam chaya vyarachanena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samadityai tan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. Yeah, it would appear here that Sukadeva is making the point that there's really no way to get out of the reactions of the material world. Not by speculation, not by knowledge. Proper atonement, that is there, it's available to make proper atonements according to the scriptures, but we also see that is very, very difficult to do. To account for everything is very, very difficult. As in the case of King Nriga, when that cow wandered from one Brahmin's flock to another, and then he had a reaction for that. It was as if he had given the same cow twice in charity, which is not acceptable, and then he ended up taking birth as a lizard. I mean, is it possible to account for everything, all the transgressions? But it's prescribed that if one that is available to try to atone, which in a sense is a step in the right direction to trying to behave properly according to the rules and regulations that Krishna set up. So it's not a rebellious spirit. It's a cooperative spirit, wanting to do the right thing. And so accepting that, well, this is the right thing, I'll do this. You want to do the right thing, not to cause pain to others or to oneself. So this is in the right direction. But as Prabhupada's explaining here, Maharaj Parikshit, Sukadeva Goswami didn't just start talking about devotional service right away. He's showing the severity of the situation, how stringent the material laws are. And then that will set the stage for how incredible the mercy of devotional service is, especially the holy name. That sets the stage. But we're having to see here very graphically and in great detail to make the point of how serious the situation really is. So Prabhupada continues, devotional service is so strong that if one fully surrenders to Krishna and takes fully to his devotional service, the reactions of his sinful life immediately stop. Okay, but Sukadeva isn't at that point yet. Elsewhere in the Gita, Lord Krishna urges that one give up all duties and surrender to him. And he promises, Aham tvam sarva pababhyo mokshayishami, I shall free you from all sinful reactions and give you liberation. Therefore, in response to the inquiries of Parikshit Maharaj, Shukadeva Goswami, his guru, could have immediately explained the principle of bhakti. But to test Parikshit Maharaj's intelligence, he first prescribed atonement according to Karmakanda, the path of fruitive activities. Yeah, so that's interesting, because in order for the actual messages of love of Godhead to actually be transmitted, There has to be a qualified speaker and a qualified hearer. There has to be the empowered guru and also the empowered disciple. So if Parikshit Maharaj were to just to accept, I can perform some karmakanda thing and then I'm out, okay, then it's not very intelligent. He would know what kind of a person was making inquiries. So Prabhupada says he's testing him here, that's the way, karmakanda. Lord Chaitanya, in his conversation with Ramananda Roy, was testing like that also. He's asking Ramananda Roy, he's acting like a devotee, Krishna, in his Shri Krishna Chaitanya form, and he's inquiring as a devotee from Ramananda Roy. He says, so how is to perfect life? And Ramananda Roy is offering different answers. And they're all correct. Varnashram Dharma, and like this. But Lord Chaitanya is rejecting these answers because he's looking for something. He's looking for the highest realization, pure devotional service, which eventually goes to taking shelter at the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. So here he's asking the questions, and Parikshit is a devotee. He wants to know what is the highest perfection. He wants to know. And Sukadeva is just giving him this karmakanda. So for karmakanda there are 80 authorized scriptures. 80 scriptures to try and pick up the loose ends on all the dumb things that a conditioned soul might do, either on purpose or accidentally. 80 scriptures, such as Manu Sanhita, which are known as Dharma Shastras. Oh my goodness. And in this age of Kali, people can't even read, never mind study these scriptures. In these scriptures, one is advised to counteract his sinful acts by performing other types of fruitive action. This was the path first recommended by Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. And actually, it is a fact that one who does not take to devotional service must follow the decision of these scriptures by performing pious acts to counteract his impious acts. This is known as atonement. So some pious acts are things like building wells, constructing roads, planting trees. These are pious acts. But there are 80 scriptures, so there's a lot of prescriptions in there. Text 8. Therefore, this is Sukadeva speaking. Therefore, before one's next death comes, as long as one's body is strong enough, one should quickly adopt the process of atonement according to Shastra. Otherwise, one's time will be lost. Reactions of his sins will increase. As an expert physician diagnoses and treats a disease according to its gravity, one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sins. So that's interesting, but Parikshit Maharaj only has 7 days to live. He knows he has, that's it for him, so he's going to start doing these atonements. There's only 7 days. So that puts the urgency of it, because not just that he only has 7 days, no one knows how long they have. I don't know how long I have. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week I'm forced out. I don't know. I'm riding a bicycle. Maybe I get hit by a car. I mean, I try not to. We don't know. So it's kind of risky to do that. And if one doesn't do it before they leave their body, then they have to go through these hellish planets. So let's see, Prabhupada's commentary here. I mean, it's not even possible for Maharaj Parikshit to do it, so. The Dharma Shastras, like Manu Sanhita, prescribe that a man who has committed murder should be hanged and his own life sacrificed in atonement. Previously, the system was followed all over the world, But since people are becoming atheists, they're stopping capital punishment. It's not wise. Herein it is said that a physician who knows how to diagnose a disease prescribes medicine accordingly. If the disease is very serious, the medicine must be strong. The weight of a murderer's sin is very great, and therefore, according to Manha Sanhita, a murderer must be killed. By killing a murderer, the government shows mercy to him, because if a murderer is not killed in this life, he will be killed and forced to suffer many times in future lives. Since people do not know about the next life and the intricate workings of nature, they manufacture their own laws. But they should properly consult the established injunctions of the Shastras and act accordingly. In India, even today, the Hindu community often takes advice from expert scholars regarding how to counteract sinful activities. In Christianity also, there is a process of confession and atonement. Therefore, atonement is required. Atonement must be undergone according to the gravity of one's sinful acts. So, for those who are not engaged in devotional service, this is the process, and it has to be done, otherwise the reactions are there. But it's not the process for devotional service, as we'll see. For those surrendering to devotional service of the Lord, this is not the process for them. So, and that is the actual solution. That's higher than atonement. That's complete liberation. Back home, back to Godhead, as we see with Jaghai and Madhai, they were murderers. They were destined for many, many lifetimes of suffering and misery. By getting the causeless mercy of Lord Nityananda and Sri Krishna Chaitanya, their whole life was turned around completely, and all of the sinful reactions for their sinful activities wiped clean, slate wiped clean. And they were free to engage in pure devotional service. I think it was Madhai actually built a bathing ghat for the Lord. Was it built Gorakund? I think. And the people were amazed to see, because previously everyone would run away from Jaghai and Madhai. They were so dangerous. Everywhere they went, they tried to hurt everybody and do terrible things, burn people's houses down, steal their money, rape the women. They were murderers. They murdered, they did everything imaginable. They were just horrible. They were monsters. And now, completely transformed, the people are watching. He's digging a bathing ghat for Lord Chaitanya. Bowing down and doesn't want to step on an ant, this kind of thing. Completely transformed. So this is the mercy of Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya. But without that mercy, then this is the recommended procedure, is to do atonement. So, actually, the Lord told him that this was his atonement. But it was not really atonement. It was devotional service. This is different. Just like jnana by itself is still material, but jnana connected to bhakti is bhakti. And yogis, are fruit of activities, karma. Without Krishna consciousness, without devotional service to the Lord, it's material. And connected to Krishna, we do some work, then it becomes bhakti. So we see here, Madhai. Oh, this is your atonement, Madhai. This is build me a bathing ghat. This is not atonement, it's bhakti. It's bhakti atonement, just like jnana, bhakti, karma bhakti, atonement bhakti. It's devotional service, a whole different level of activity, spiritualized completely. Text 9. So, Maharaj Parikshit said, one may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing sinful acts. But nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what's the value of such atonement? Okay, so not only can Maharaj Parikshit not do any atonements, if he indeed needed to, he may not have even needed to, he's a devotee, great devotee, but he really couldn't anyway, does time-wise not allowing. So, but the question he's asking is that he sees that people, even though they hear from scriptures not to do a certain thing, and they see other people go ahead and do it and then get the reaction, and sometimes they go ahead and do it themselves and they get a reaction, and they still inclined to do this forbidden thing, this thing that brings these hellish conditions, this hellish suffering. So then he asks, so what's the value of it then? Atonement, what's the value? Like, so you go to confession, you confess, oh, I used some bad words and I stole some money from my mother's pocket book, like this. And then, all right, you have some atonement, you say so many prayers, chant so many grace on your beads, and maybe fast for the day, I don't know, whatever the atonements are, or give some certain amount of money, whatever the atonement is. But then they're back again next week. Oh, I sinned, I used bad words, and I stole some money from my aunt's pocketbook. So what good is it? He's asking. Why is it? What's the value of it? They're doing the atonement to get clean. What is it? The example of the elephant. They go in the river, and they take a nice bath. They put their snout in the what do you call the elephants? And they take the water and they spray it all over themselves and all over their other friends, their elephant friends and family. And they get all nice and clean. And then they come out and they roll on the dust in the ground and get all dirty again. Right after they come out of the water. So what's the use of trying to get clean like that and just go back in and get dirty again? He's asking, what's the use of this atonement? Prabhupada's commentary. In some religious sects, a sinful man goes to a priest to confess his sinful acts and pay a fine. But then he again commits the same sins, returns to confess them again. This is the practice of a professional sinner. Parikshit Maharaj's observation indicates that even 5,000 years ago, it was the practice of these criminals to atone for their crimes, but then commit the same crimes again, as if forced to do so. Therefore, owing to his practical experience, Parikshit Maharaj saw that the process of repeatedly sinning and atoning is pointless. Yeah, as if forced to do so. So the person knows it's wrong, they've heard it's wrong, they've seen others get punished for it, but still they insist on doing it. And then they apologize for doing it, they make some atonement, they confess, I knew it was wrong, I shouldn't have done it, I'm so sorry, what can I do to correct it? Pay some fine, okay. Then they go out and they do it again, as if forced to. Because the root of the sinful desire has not been removed. Like weeds in the garden, just snip off the top and the root is still in the ground, it just grows back. So this atonement is like that. You snip off the top, but the root is still in there, and it just grows back. So Prabhupada continues, regardless of how many times he's punished, one who is attached to sense enjoyment will commit sinful acts again and again until he's trained to refrain from enjoying his senses. The word vivasa is used herein, indicating that even one who does not want to commit sinful acts will be forced to do so by habit. Parikshit Maharaj therefore considered the process of atonement to have little value for saving one from sinful acts. The following verse, he further explains his rejection of this process. The senses are so strong when they are agitated, when they are in contact with the sense objects. If the desire for enjoying sensually, the root of that is still there, then it is as if by force one is forced. So the root is to get the desire out. The desire is to serve Krishna. So even when the temptation is there, there's no desire to engage. Is it like a yogi is like the turtle. The turtle can pull his limbs within the shell when there's danger. He can pull his limbs in. So like that, the yogi, the disciplined yogi, they can pull their senses back from the desire, by not having that desire for sense enjoyment, even when there's temptation there. They can withdraw their senses. So that's by training. That's not even on the level of devotional service. That's just yogis training to control their senses and their mind from engaging unnecessarily, like people that have the bad habit of eating very fattening foods, and then they get very fat, and they're very unhealthy, and they're very unattractive. Body is very unattractive, and so they're miserable. So they want to lose weight, but they still want to eat those things, fattening foods, because they have that taste, that desire. So they have to develop another taste. It has to become stronger so that they can control their senses. But is it simply by refraining from the sense, simply from refraining from sense enjoyment doesn't work, though, ultimately, because there has to be a higher taste. But at least that much is to be practiced, can be practiced. Practice to refrain. But without getting a higher taste, then that can't be maintained eternally. So there has to be a higher pleasure. Transcendental senses, spiritual senses. And that is in relationship to serving Krishna, Radha Krishna. So, he's going to be further explaining this process in the next few verses. So they're having a very good discussion here. They haven't even gotten to devotional service. They're just discussing how this is the details and the dynamics of how a person goes to what the hellish planets are, what they're like, why they're there, what is punishable, and now how to avoid going there. And this is not even including devotional service as of yet. This is karma kanda, how to atone, how to try to neutralize the effects of one's sinful activities. So this is text 10. Sometimes one who is very alert so as not to commit sinful acts is victimized by sinful life again. I therefore consider this process of repeated sinning and atonement to be useless. It's like the bathing of an elephant, for an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath, but then throws dust all over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. Exhausting. This goes on lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Commentary. When Parikshit Maharaj inquired how a human being could free himself from sinful activities so as not to be forced to go to hellish planetary systems after death, Sukadeva Goswami answered, the process of counteracting sinful life is atonement. In this way, Sukadeva Goswami tested the intelligence of Maharaj Parikshit, who passed the examination by refusing to accept this process as genuine. Now Parikshit Maharaj is expecting another answer from his spiritual master, Sukadeva Goswami. He didn't accept that answer. Just like Lord Chaitanya didn't accept that Varnashram Dharma was the highest goal of life when he inquired from Ramananda Roy. He doesn't accept it. No, you have to go higher than that. There's got to be something else. And Parikshit Maharaj here says it doesn't even work. I've seen. It doesn't work. Plus, if Maharaj Parikshit wanted to, he couldn't even do it because he only has 7 days to live. So there's got to be something else. So text 11. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vedavyas, answered, "My dear king, since acts meant to neutralize impious actions are also fruitive, they will not release one from the tendency to act fruitively. Persons who subject themselves to rules and regulations of atonement are not at all intelligent. Indeed, they're in the mode of darkness. Unless one is freed from the mode of ignorance, trying to counteract one action through another action is useless, because this will not uproot one's desires. Thus, even though one may superficially seem pious, he will undoubtedly be prone to act impiously. Therefore, real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, Vedanta, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth." Okay, so we're getting closer. So they're not intelligent, and not only are they not intelligent, they're in the mode of ignorance. It's a mode of ignorance to simply perform atonement for sinful acts, and then go ahead and do the same thing over again, and then atonement over again, and then it's a mode of ignorance, because it does not uproot one's desires. Prabhupada's commentary. The Guru, Sukadeva Goswami, has examined Parikshit Maharaj, and it appears the king has passed one phase of the examination by rejecting the process of atonement because it involves fruitive activities. Now Sukadeva Goswami is suggesting the platform of speculative knowledge, progressing from karma kanda to jnana kanda. He's proposing prayashitam vimarshanam. Real atonement is full knowledge. Vimarshana refers to the cultivation of speculative knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita, karmis who are lacking in knowledge are compared to asses. Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita, "Na mam duskritano muda prapadyante naradma maya priya pritagyana ashuram bhavam asrita." Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, who partake of atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Those karmis who engage in sinful acts and who do not know the true object of life are called mudhas, asses. Namam diskritino muda. Vimarshana, however, is also explained in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Vedescha sarvair ahameva vedya. The purpose of Vedic study is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one studies Vedanta, but merely advances somewhat in speculative knowledge, does not understand the Supreme Lord, one remains the same Muda. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, one attains real knowledge when he understands Krishna, surrenders unto him, Bahunam Janmanamante, Jnanavamam Padyante. To become learned and free from material contamination, therefore one should try to understand Krishna, for thus one is ultimately liberated from all pious and impious activities and their reactions. So if people approach Vedanta because they want something other than Krishna, then they just remain the same Mudha. That's where the association of the pure devotees is so valuable, because they can bring that out, what the actual purpose of the Vedas is, because they embody the conclusion. They embody devotional service. They are the carriers, the representatives of the Lord in devotional service. So without that, if someone tries to approach the Vedas outside of the spiritual master, the devotional spiritual master, then it's not accessible. They won't be able to take the lid off and taste the sweetness. That's Krishna's arrangement. Because he says in the Gita, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am standing before you. So that is the devotee. Only by the devotee standing before you can Krishna be understood. Because they are the embodiment of undivided devotional service. These energies are not impersonal, they're personal energies. Radharani is a person. Krishna is a person. The pure devotee is a person. And undivided devotional service is a person. So, by hearing from that devotee who is the embodiment of undivided devotional service, and Krishna is available. Krishna consciousness is available. Without that, to try to approach Vedanta, then you don't get that dimension. Because Krishna says, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am before you. Only by. Without that connection with the devotee of Krishna, then it remains speculative. This means this and that means that, and referencing and cross-referencing and memorizing and studying, and don't make the connection. So that's speculative. Speculative knowledge. Even approaching Veda, this means speculative knowledge. Even though on every page Krishna is saying, I'm understood through my representative, undivided devotional service. That's how you understand me. Even though he's saying that in every verse on every page, they continue to speculate without taking shelter. And so the sinful desires within the heart, the fruitive desires, they remain there. They're not rooted out. That taste remains for fruitive gain till they get a higher taste. Text 12. My dear king, if a diseased person eats the pure, uncontaminated food prescribed by a physician, he's gradually cured, and the infection of disease can no longer touch him. Similarly, if one follows the regulative principles of knowledge, he gradually progresses toward liberation from material contamination. So he's testing him again. He's testing him again, simply by knowledge. Following regulative principles of knowledge, progresses toward liberation. He's testing him again. See, the pure representative of Krishna is sitting there in front of him. Sukadeva Goswami is the embodiment of devotional service, sitting there before Parikshit Maharaj. He's right there. And he's pointing over here, and he's pointing over there. First he's pointing to atonement, that's how. And then he's pointing to, speculative knowledge, that's how. But actually, Sukadeva Goswami himself is as brilliant as the sun. He's the person Bhagavat. Pure representative of Krishna sitting there before him. But Parikshit Maharaj is serving him by asking these questions. So he's engaged in devotional service. This is a pastime. So now Sukadev's pointing over here. It's over there. Speculative knowledge, that's the way you just go. Or knowledge. Prabhupada's commentary. One is gradually purified if one cultivates knowledge, even through mental speculation, and strictly follows regulative principles enjoined in Shastra as explained in the next verse. Therefore, the platform of jnana, speculative knowledge, is better than the platform of karma, fruit of action. There is every chance of falling from the platform of karma to hellish conditions, but on the platform of jnana, one is saved from hellish life, although it's still not completely free from infection. The difficulty is on the platform of jnana, one thinks he has been liberated and has become Narayan or Bhagavan. And this is another phase of ignorance. Okay, so there is a graduation here. The atonement on the fruitive platform doesn't work at all. That doesn't work. It's in the mode of ignorance. But when you get into knowledge, actual knowledge, then yes, gradually one does become, is saved from hellish life, and they can become liberated from the bodily conception. But the problem is, he thinks he's become Narayan. He thinks he's become as good as God. So that's the problem, and not making the connection with the actual Narayan, but he thinks he is actually Narayan. He is God. So that's another phase of ignorance. Because of ignorance, one speculatively thinks himself liberated from material contamination, although actually he is not. Therefore, even if one rises to Brahmagyan, understanding of Brahman, one nevertheless falls down because of not taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Nonetheless, jnanis at least know what is sinful and what is pious, and they very cautiously act according to the injunctions of Shastras. So that's not a real safe place to be either. It is very possible to fall down because of not being engaged properly. Every living entity remains active, cannot remain inactive even for a moment. Even when someone's sleeping, their mind is active. Cannot remain inactive even for a moment. So without being able to be active on the spiritual platform, engaged in devotional service, still subject to being drawn into the material energy. On a gross plane, a subtle plane. So there's still contamination there without devotional activity, devotional service. Text 13, 14. So Sukadeva continues, to concentrate the mind, one must observe a life of celibacy and not fall down. One must undergo the austerity of voluntarily giving up sense enjoyment. One must then control the mind and senses, give charity, be truthful, clean, and non-violent, follow regulative principles, and regularly chant the holy name of the Lord. Thus, a sober and faithful person who knows religious principles is temporarily purified of all sins performed with his body, words, and mind. These sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree, which may be burnt by fire, although their roots remain to grow again at the first opportunity. This is interesting. It's getting close to devotional practices here. Regularly chant the holy name of the Lord, clean, non-violent, follow regulative principles. Celibacy, this is like Brahminical platform, up now through like mode of goodness, like Brahman. So we'll see here, maybe we get how we can distinguish Brahminical from Vaishnava. So let's see. Prabhupada's commentary, Tapa, is explained in Shriti Shastra as follows. Complete control of the mind and senses and their complete concentration on one kind of activity is called Tapa. This is what Lord Brahma performed at the beginning of the universe. When he found himself seated on the lotus flower, which came from the navel lake of Mahavishnu. And he didn't know where he was, what he was supposed to do. He had no idea what, but he heard the sound, tapa, which means perform austerities. And so he meditated, performed austerity, meditation for 1,000 years by the demigods. Krishna was pleased that he followed that instruction that he was given and performed the necessary austerity, and then revealed to him what his service was, who he was, who Krishna is, what his relationship to Krishna, revealed everything to them from within the heart. So that was the practice in beginning of the universe, was for Lord Brahma to perform this tapa. Also in the Satya Yuga, people have very long lifespan and they meditate, which is a kind of tapasya. For thousands and thousands of years they meditate. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching people how to concentrate the mind on devotional service. So there's a definition here of tapasya: complete control of the mind and senses and a complete concentration on one kind of activity. That's tapasya. So, Prabhupada says, our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching people how to concentrate the mind on devotional service. So that's tapasya. This is first-class tapa. Brahmacharya, the life of celibacy, has 8 aspects. One should not think of women, should not speak of sex life, should not hang around with women, should not look lustfully at women, should not talk intimately with women or decide to engage in sexual intercourse. One should not endeavor for sexual life or engage in sex life. One should not even think of women or look at them, to say nothing of talking with them. This is called first-class brahmachari. If a brahmachari or sannyasi talks with a woman in a secluded place, naturally there'll be a possibility of sex life without anyone's knowledge. Therefore, a complete brahmachari practices just the opposite. If one is a perfect brahmachari, he can very easily control the mind and senses, give charity, speak truthfully, and so forth. To begin, however, one must control the tongue and the process of eating. And a nice description there of first-class brahmachari. Nothing to do with women whatsoever. Not talking to, not looking at, not hanging around with, and not thinking about sex life, and not like this. And certainly not engaging in sex life. It's a life of tapasya, brahmachari. In the Bhakti Marg, the path of devotional service, one must strictly follow regulative principles by first controlling the tongue. Sevan mukha hi jibadav swayam evas paratyadav. The tongue, jiva, can be controlled if one chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, does not speak of any subjects other than those concerning Krishna, does not taste anything not offered to Krishna. If one can control the tongue in this way, brahmacharya and other purifying processes will automatically follow. It will be explained in next verse that the path of devotional service is completely perfect and is therefore superior to the path of fruitive activities and the path of knowledge. Quoting from the Vedas, Srila Vairaragava Acharya explains that austerity involves observing fast as fully as possible. Tapasana shakena. Srila Rupa Goswami also has advised that atyahar, too much eating, is an impediment to advancement in spiritual life. Also, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yuktahara viharasya, yukta chetasya karmasu, yukta swapno vabodasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing yoga system. In text 14, the word dhira, meaning those who are undisturbed under all circumstances, is very significant. Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparsastu kanteya sitosna sukadukada agamapayino nityas tam titikshas vabharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, the disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O Skyan of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In material life, there are many disturbances, adhyatmika, adidaivika, adibhaudika. One who has learned to tolerate these disturbances under all circumstances is called dhira. So, the life of brahmachari seems, if someone hears this seems impossible in this day and age. What was it? The missionaries, Bhaktisiddhanta sent some of his disciples to England to try to, this was the first part of the century, to try to interest people in taking up Krishna consciousness, coming to Krishna consciousness, taking up devotional service. And I think it was the famous Lord Jetland or something, that when he said, I would like to become a Brahmin, what do I have to do? That was nice, he said that. And when it was explained, he would have to follow certain regulatory principles, and no sex life outside of marriage, and only for producing children, and no intoxicants, no gambling, no meat, fish, or eggs. He recoiled instantly. That's impossible. I can't do it. It's impossible. That's my life. So, it's very high standards for strict brahmachari. And Prabhupada explains it begins with the tongue. There's a straight line in the body, tongue, belly, genitals. If the tongue is controlled, that's the beginning. You control the tongue, speaking about Krishna, and taking foodstuff offered to Krishna. Tongue is controlled, it's a straight line, then everything else will be peaceful and not agitated and disturbed. You control the tongue. So controlling the tongue. What better way to control the tongue? To hear and chant about Krishna and take Krishna Prasadam. There you go, perfection of life. Develop a taste for Krishna Prasadam and develop a taste for glorifying Krishna. No taste, no room for anything else. Nothing else appears attractive. No taste. And the conditioned soul has done those other things, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And where was the happiness? So, been there, done that. Where does it go? It just goes around and around and around and around. It's never really happy. It's always miserable, never satisfying. It's fleeting. So, better to practice is Krishna consciousness. Take foodstuff offered to Krishna and glorify Krishna. Chant and control the tongue. That's one of the things for this reading out loud, is it engages the tongue and the ears. So, reading is good. I just sit quietly at night, silently read. That's all right. Engaging the eyes in reading, in the mind. But by reading out loud, engaging the tongue, which means the ears are also involved, and the eyes, because of reading, then there are 5 senses, knowledge-acquiring senses. 3 of them are captured on one thing. This is what Prabhupada is describing as tapasya. When one is focused, so this is how we focus, we capture 3 of the senses. When we're chanting japa, the 3 senses are a sense of touch, hearing, and speaking. Then 3 of the senses are captivated. And when we're reading out loud, then the eyesight, the tongue, and the ear are captivated. And they're focused on one thing, Krishna.